Hey everybody, and welcome back to the next part in my viewer-submitted tone series where I take some of my viewers' patches that they've sent to me asking for help to tweak them a little bit to get them closer to what the sound they're hearing in their head or that works for them in the situation that they're in with the patch. This week I have a patch by a great fella named Andy Crocco who submitted this to me through the gear page, actually. He sent me a message through there and asked me if I could take a look at this patch, which had 4 snapshots that I was dealing with, which he has as low dirt, medium gain, high gain, and heavy lead. Sorry, just looking at my Helix down there with the scribble strips. So his complaint was that he found that this was the first patch he found that he built. He told me he was using some of the things from my videos, like putting the compressor at the end and the EQ at the end and kind of a little mastering section. And he built a nice patch. He had mentioned to me that in the past he had used purchased presets that he was having some decent fortune with, but this was the first one he felt he could use. But he said it wasn't really cutting live quite well enough. And he wanted some help with that. Now, the other thing he mentioned to me is that he uses some IRs in this from 3 Sigma IRs. So again, wasn't totally familiar with them. Very nice stuff, but he did something really great, is that he contacted 3 Sigma to ask them if it's okay if he submits them to me. And they agreed as long as I made, mention that they were used in this patch, and that's great and wonderful. That's something I really encourage everybody to do, There's a lot of great companies out there working hard to give us products, third-party products such as IRs, right? And I always feel it's just great to support these people. Please purchase whatever you're going to use, So, he submitted these to me. Anytime anybody sends me anything with a third-party IR, I automatically either just delete it or I just never use it. I don't use anything anybody sends me that I haven't purchased. If I did hear something here that I really liked, I would go and purchase it off of the company. Unless I made an agreement, for using it in the video with them. But anyway, so just really support, there's a lot of great companies, small companies doing some really great work. And I think it's really important to always support those companies. So just a little side point, nothing to do with much in this video. Okay, so so I am using the 3 Sigma. So check those folks out if you like what you hear here. From what I've heard, this is my first opportunity using them, but they make some fine IRs. All right, so what Andy had here was, let's go over to HX Edit. He had a patch that was using the Placator Dirty with various settings. Now, he found that it didn't cut well. I think the patch was quite well done. You see, he has some mod effects, some verb delay. I didn't touch anything, really, other than some EQ changes. And I think you'll hear why when I start playing through it. I found his tone was just a little bit too dark and it needed to be brightened up a little bit. But that's always a tricky thing, right? We don't want to go too bright that once you get to stage volume, it's going to be really abrasive sounding. So I tried to get a nice balance there that was going to work for him. So the IRs he's using, he had 2, like I said, as the snapshot switch here, he had different ones. I guess that's an Engel cabinet 412, and that says Fried 412, so I don't know, I guess Friedman cabinet 412. I'm not really familiar with what the IRs are, but that's what he used here. So let's take a look at the sounds he had. So he had one labeled low dirt, and that sounded like this. Then he had medium gain. High gain. And then lead. Andy mentioned to me he very seldom ever plays in the neck pickup, just the bridge pickup. I thought he might have mentioned he used a Duncan JB in the bridge. Again, I'm going by memory here. So anyways, this is a Duncan pick. I think this is a 59 in this one. But anyways, it's going to be hard, like I said, to have the exact guitar and pickups that everybody's using. But it kind of gets the point across. So those are his sounds. Now, what I did, let's go through the changes I made on mine, and then we can compare the tones, okay? So my notes have here that the one big change that I made across all the snapshots is Andy on his patch, as we'll see here, if we go to this final low and high cut block that he had the high cut set on different snapshots to be on different settings. So on the low dirt, it was at 9 kilohertz, 9.5 kilohertz on snapshot 3, 8.5 kilohertz on snapshot 3, and 7.5 kilohertz on snapshot 4. Okay, so you can see how it changes. 9 on snapshot 1, 9.5 on snapshot 2, on snapshot 3, 8.5, and then 7.5. Now, that was a bit of a problem, I thought, and why he was probably getting some very dark tonality to it and lack of cut live, right? So what I did on mine is, regardless of preset, snapshot, I just kept them at 10 kilohertz. And I also, if you noticed, he had his low cut at 120 hertz, which I found was just a little bit too high to cut out some of the nice fullness in the bottom, so I changed that to 100. So that didn't change now with the preset. So that's one of the main changes I made. Now, as we go through the snapshots, let's just talk about the changes I made here. Snapshot 1, I went to his final EQ that he put here, and I took 160 hertz. And I took that with a Q of 2.1 and I pulled back 2 dB just to kind of get maybe some of that low, that bottom under control a little bit more. And I'm just looking here, I think I kind of did that for the most part on all of them. Let's go through our snapshot and see how that changes. So minus 2 dB, stays at minus 2 dB. Yeah, so that stayed at minus 2 dB all through there. One thing I did on his final EQ here in his mid frequencies, what he was doing originally, he had 1 kilohertz set at a Q of 2, and he was, I'll show you that on his preset here. So you can see here, 1 kilohertz, a Q of 2 was set 0 there, and he had a plus 5.2 on the heavy lead, trying to get some cut into it. I wasn't finding that was working too well. So what I actually did is I went into that EQ, and through all the snapshots, you'll notice I changed the mid-frequency to 420 hertz with a Q of 2, and I lowered it by 1.5 dB just to try to get some of the mud out of the way. Snapshot 2, I lowered that by 2 dB, 1.5 dB on snapshot 3, and 1 dB on snapshot 4, okay? So I always find in that 400, 450 range is where some of the mud lives, and if a sound isn't cutting, I find a lot of people go up into the higher mids and start boosting frequencies, which maybe can add in some harshness, sometimes, depending on the frequencies you boost, depending on a lot of situation. But I find I usually start by pulling some of the lower mids out, and it gets away from that need to go and boost a lot of the upper mids or high end, okay? All right, so the other thing that Andy had on his patch in the EQ, as we go through here, his high frequency was set at 6.1 kilohertz with a Q of 0.7, pretty wide, plus 2.3 dB on his low dirt sound. That stayed the same on snapshot 2, 3, and then on snapshot 4, he took that same 6.1 kilohertz, but he pulled it back 1 dB. So really darkened up that tone. So that's probably, whoops, sorry about that. You know. And that in combination with the quite dramatic high cut here at 7.5 kilohertz was a recipe for it to kind of be really dark and pulled back in the mix, right? If I was recording with that tone, I could record that, but later on when I'm mixing, I'm going to end up trying to EQ that to sit better in the mix. So we might as well try to get it closer to that right now. So what I did, if we go through, with the higher frequency on snapshot 1, I took 4.5 kilohertz and a Q of 1.7, I raised it 3.5 dB. Slightly different settings, only up 2.3 dB on the second snapshot. Third snapshot, same thing, up 2.3 dB. And 4.5 kilohertz, up 2 dB on the lead channel, which allowed it to cut a little bit more, again, in conjunction with that little cut in the mid frequencies, the lower mids, right? So higher mids up a little bit. But if you notice, I went a little bit lower than the 6.1 kilohertz frequency that Andy chose, okay? So those little changes, I'm trying to see what else here. Those are the EQ changes I made. Now, as far as the amp changes go, from what my notes say, on snapshot 1, I took the treble and I took it, Andy had it set at 4.9, I raised that to 7.1. I find the placator, as I've talked about in my dialing in video with the placator, the presence and treble are really important controls on this. We can get away with quite high settings, and that's what really gives this amp its cut. So I added a bit there to help that cut through. On snapshot 2, I did the same thing again. Amp treble went from 4.9 to 7. On snapshot 3, I raised the presence from 6 to 8. And the amp channel volume, I also, trying to see here, sorry, I'm just trying to refer to my notes. The presence went up to 8.3, and I brought the amp channel volume up to 6. Just trying to balance the volume between the patches, okay? So those are some of the changes I made to the amp. So just some work in the treble and presence of the amp settings, okay? So how did this end up sounding? Well, let's compare these side by side for each one. So let's start with the low dirt. Here was Andy's low dirt sound. Here's what happened after my changes. You can tell it's going to cut a little bit more. Hopefully not too much. But again, you know, if Andy got live, and by the way, Andy did use these live finally, and he said he loved them. He said they sounded great, and he was very, very happy with how it was all working. So I was very happy to hear that, as always. You know, I'm always happy with that. But again, you know, if he did get to the point where he found, it's just a little bit too harsh maybe, or it's cutting a little bit too much, you could always come into the presence here, pull that back a tad, or maybe just come into the high mids here, pull that back a tad so you're happy. It doesn't take much sometimes. Half a dB, a dB and a half, and we're right back to where we want it to be, okay? So that was the difference between snapshot 1. Let me just get these set up so I can... Okay, so here was Andy's snapshot 2, his medium gain. Here's what I came up with. Okay, so again, you can hear how it's cutting a little bit better. His high gain snapshot, let's just get these set up here. Here's his high gain one. Here's the changes I made. All right, and finally, let's go to the heavy lead snapshot on both. And here was his heavy lead. A little bit of delay comes on this one. And here's what I did on that one. Okay, so you can hear how that is going to cut quite a bit more as well. So So Andy was pretty happy with that. Really, it was a great preset. Really not a whole lot wrong with it, just a little bit more maybe clarity or cut in the upper mids is all that was needed. So a couple words of caution that I've found with a lot of the patches, and I think people are afraid things are going to be too harsh live, right? It's a tricky balance trying to get that high end and high mids to sit right, you know? But if you find that a preset is too dark, be careful that you're not high cutting too much. Seldom do I go below maybe 10 kilohertz. Usually I sit around 12 kilohertz, sometimes even higher depending. You know, or if I do bring that quite a bit lower, maybe down to 9 or 9.5, which I have done, I'll go up into my upper mids, maybe in 4 to 5 kilohertz, and give that a little, generous boost of a few dB maybe, and play that by ear a little bit, right? But the other really big thing is always look in that 400, 450 hertz range as well to give it a little cut, right? And not too much. A little goes a long way there, but that can clean things up a lot. Get rid of the mud and allow it to cut through, right? So we got to be careful of our high cuts, and then we can always go and add in a little bit in the sort of upper mids. It's going to help our sound to cut through. And it's just, you know, we don't always have to use a sledgehammer, right? Sometimes we can just finesse it just a little bit. A couple dB here, a couple dB there, a little cut, little boost in the right places, and it can go a long way, which I've talked about in a lot of the videos before. So anyways, I really want to thank Andy and the folks at 3 Sigma IRs as well for giving the okay to put this all on the video and to use the IRs. I'm not going to be sharing this preset just for the reason that there are third-party IRs and I don't have clearance to give those away. They're not mine. That always seems to be a big thing when I do a video like this with IRs. Is that people say, "Oh, I'll share it without the IRs," and I kind of don't want to put it on custom tone. But maybe I'll set up a sort of a link that I can share with anybody who wants this without the IRs, if they already own those IRs or they want to purchase those IRs. That would be a good idea too. So maybe I'll do that. Anybody can just send me a message or leave me some comments if they're interested in that. And so yeah, like I said, thank you to Andy and the folks at 3 Sigma. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you got something out of it that can help you maybe to tweak your own presets, all right? So please like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, share it if you don't mind. I really appreciate all the support and kind words and comments. Please let me know what you think, and I will be back with more content soon. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and ciao for now. Talk soon.